Hello and welcome back. This video is about common FCM challenges. As a short introduction, pitfalls and biases are appear in qualitative research, and we are also covering general challenges when it comes to conducting FCMs. Rather than in quantitative research, where you have counts or measures, a bias appears in qualitative research because it involves descriptions, related characteristics and meanings, and their interpretations. So qualitative research is prone to bias or leanings or non-objectivity, because the research instrument and the research subjects are humans. And here, synonyms for bias are, for instance, preconceived opinion, preference, prejudgment, prejudice, tendency, or all different synonyms that you see here. And when I talk about challenges in this video, I mean those related to drawing FCMs, our objectives, identifying concepts and interrelationships. So the overall aim here is to increase scientific rigor and comparability. So then let's start. Here in this video, we will focus mainly on three things: participant bias and how to reduce it, researcher bias and how to reduce it, and other challenges when it comes to drawing and FCM, so fuzzy cognitive maps, or when conducting fuzzy cognitive mapping interviews. There are actually many forms of biases in all stages of research, and in particularly qualitative research. The participant bias is when respondents or participants answer based on what he or she thinks is the right answer, or what is socially acceptable, rather than what he or she really feels. Or if the participants are opinionated about the sponsor of the interview, for instance, which could lead them to agree either to everything or nothing. And the researcher bias is when asking questions that may affect the participant's response to a following question, or when asking leading questions that may suggest a certain response. If researchers select participants that may be suitable to meet their hypothesis, or include only data or only answers that they think are relevant. So all these aspects can lead to researcher bias or participant bias. So when we first look at participant bias and ways to reduce it, I have here on the left-hand side a more closer description of the bias, and then on the right-hand side in a minute, forms and ways of tricks of how to avoid it. So there is, for instance, the acquiescence bias or friendliness bias that occurs when the participant chooses to agree with the moderator or researcher. Some participants may agree just to complete the interview, and this typically happens once fatigue sets in. And you can avoid that when by using open-ended questions that invites or requests the participant from simply agreeing or disagreeing. And when you ask the question in different ways, for instance, if the answer do not sound true, or you can let the participants select from a range of potential choices rather than only yes or no, that you offer more options. Then a second form of participant bias is the social desirability bias or social acceptability bias. Many participants respond inaccurately just so that they could be liked or think that they would be better accepted, especially in cases of sensitive questions or questions on personal or controversial topics. And how can you avoid this? Well, phrase questions that participants feel accepted no matter what the answer is, and use rather indirect questions that ask what a third party would do in particular situation, not really asking what would you do as a participant, yeah, but asking what do you think would one do? What do you think would a person do? So put this in a third tense. And that helps the participant to project his or her own feelings onto others and provide accurate, truthful, and more representative answers. Then let's go to the next. And this is the habituation bias. And that occurs when participants provide the same answers in response to similarly worded questions. So when they have the feeling, that's that question again. Yeah, okay, that again. And yeah, you, as you might think, you can avoid this, first of all, by phrasing questions differently so that it's very clear to the participant what the question is about and that they don't sound similar. And then also be engaging throughout the interview. Yeah. For instance, when fatigue sets in, which can occur when we ask for relations in the FCMs, because that always is kind of the same or a similar question. So try to change the formulation of asking for relations and their weights. And then let's now turn to researcher bias. So a first form of researcher bias is confirmation bias. This most common and highly recognized bias occurs when a researcher interprets the data to support his or her hypothesis. Researchers may also omit data that doesn't favor their hypothesis. And I am putting that here, although you're not analyzing the data, I'm putting it here because you are collecting the data. So when you hear the responses, when you hear the answers of the respondents, then it is important that you note down everything that you hear and that you make everything into a concept, even when it has not occurred before. So really try to stay open-minded and practice active listening. Consider all the data obtained, continually reevaluate the impressions and responses, and ensure that pre-existing assumptions are kept at bay. So for instance, if you have done a number of interviews, prevent already analyzing in your head that most respondents have answered this and this, and most have said that and that. Try to keep that away. Do not yet analyze it, so to say, in your own head, because that would then lead you to be prejudiced. Yeah. So really, until the last interview, practice active listening, be open, and be open to even very new concepts in the last interview. For instance, add all concepts and weights, as I had said, even those that are surprising or seem unrelated. So then a second form of researcher bias is, and you may know that when you are a social scientist, that is answering leading questions. We should not do that. Questions that lead or prompt the participant in the direction of probable outcomes. And you avoid that by keeping the questions simple and by use open questions, yeah, that do not prompt participants to respond in favor of certain assumptions, like, for instance, please explain, yeah, or can you repeat that? Things like that. And then a third form of researcher bias occurs when you probe people. So very often that can happen at that moment. So interviewers are asking questions in order to understand and probe for more details. In particular, probing for more details can be necessary in FCMs to get a map of good complexity. And I would say that a map of good complexity has approximately 10 to 15 concepts. So if you have only 5, make sure that you really understand each concept and that they are detailed enough for you to clearly understand what is meant. If then the participant is still assuring that your cognitive map is complete, then you can leave it at 5, but usually you need like 10 to 15, let's say. And you avoid it by probing without introducing bias. So for instance, by asking, what does that mean to you? How would you describe that in more detail? Or can you please explain that in other words to me? So just to repeat, often, in particular, when the concepts that are given are broad, you would need to ask in return for more details and you need to probe the interviewer, but make that with open-ended questions and without leading questions. So with that, we are finishing the biases part, and I now come to more particular challenges that we have identified in the pilot studies doing the FCMs on migration choices. And there is the first one, particularly identifying concepts. So what is a concept? And here is an example of a very large FCM. So I just want to mention that your FCM based on individual concepts, on individual perceptions will be much smaller. So that is a social map. Here are approximately 60 FCMs integrated. Yeah, yours will be much smaller. And when you do it, then a good rule of thumb is that you identify concepts that are stocks. So a good concept can increase or decrease. And here you see, for instance, drinking water shortage. Yes, that can increase and decrease, but it is you would understand it, but it is on the edge. Also mosquitoes. I mean, the number of mosquitoes can increase. Yeah, but also vector-borne diseases. In that sense, you would probably, count an incidence. Or flooded roads is also something that has a little bit of a degree of that. A really good concept is number of customers. Yeah? So as much as possible, try to introduce concepts that can increase or decrease. In that FCM here, and that fuzzy cognitive map, can't set up shop is not a very good concept. We still used it because you can potentially count the days that you can't set up the shop, but better is that you have more quantitative concepts. It makes it easier for you to understand the map. And the second challenge is the chronological order, and that you need to make sure that you still look at cause-effect relationships. So in particular, when asking for migration and cause-effect relations or causes of migration and their consequences, we've identified that some people give you their life stages in a chronological order. First, I moved here because of that, and then I moved here because of that, and then I moved there because of that. This is not what we want. We really want to ask why people moved to that place where they currently reside, and then what their causes were, either in push or pull factors, and potentially what the consequences were where they are now. So try to avoid a chronological narrative. Be careful that people don't give you a sequence of their life stages, but really cause-effect relations. And then a third challenge is that by all means, it makes it difficult if you have double negatives. So try to avoid those. And what we mean here is that it happens in particular when you add a qualifier to a concept, like less work. This is then very hard and potentially prone to error when you add the direction of the cause-effect relation and whether it's increasing or decreasing. It just invites for error. So rather say with the error that it's decreasing, and then you mention as a concept amount of work. And we have a couple of those in here where it's not that easy. So for instance, no work or shops closed. These are concepts that can be handled, but in that case, please watch out for the direction of the relationship. And a fourth challenge could be to identify the cause-effect relationships, as I have already mentioned. So here, just a couple of hints. Think like a change in one concept leads to a change in the second concept. And this is if an increase in the first concept leads to an increase in the second, or you could very shortly say more makes more, then we are talking about a positive relationship. If we have an increase in the first concept, but a decrease in the second concept. So the increase in the first leads to a decrease in the second, or we could say more makes less, then we are talking about a negative relationship. So with that, just a short summary. We here looked at participant bias and how you can reduce it by open-ended questions or range of options, by posing indirect questions, and by different formulation of similar questions. We also looked at researcher bias and how we can prevent it, for instance, by practicing active listening, by posing simple questions and not suggesting leading questions or not using leading questions, and probing without introducing bias. And we've talked about challenges when doing FCMs, and these relate to identifying concepts as stocks, avoiding a chronological narrative, avoiding double negatives, and really identifying correct cause-effect relationships. And with that, I am, that video is finished. Okay, so thank you very much.